Hello everybody, I continue development of my Yii2 e-commerce website, which is an open source product. You can find the link in the video description, and I created already an MVP, 16 hours video split into two parts. You can find this on my channel. In this specific video, we're going to implement the Webpack in our project with ES6 Babel and SaaS building. So that's on our e-commerce website, we definitely need to have like CSS preprocessors. We want to write some modern JavaScript or maybe even TypeScript, and we need to integrate Webpack with our project. Again, if you haven't watched these previous videos, check out the video description. This is totally 16 hours video, as I mentioned, and yeah, just watch it. And in this specific video, like we're going to only focus on the Webpack. If you enjoy this open source project, just give it a start to the repository. If you learn something new from my videos, just give it a like and subscribe. Okay, let's start, and I'm going to open the PHP Storm, and the very first thing what we need to do is to create package.json in the project, because we're going to install Webpack and Webpack CLI. Okay, I'm going to open the terminal and I'm going to run npm init-y. To skip all the questions, it will generate that package.json for me. And here it is. Let's find that. Here's the package.json. Okay, I'm going to change a couple of things right here. The description contains HTML tags, which I don't want. That was taken from the README by default, so I'm going to remove that and maybe just write open source e-commerce, open source Yii2 e-commerce website. Okay, so inside the scripts, I'm going to write npm start. And actually, I'm going to get back to this later. The repository will be this one, it's correct. The license, I'm going to get back to license as well. So yeah, everything looks good so far. Let's focus on the Webpack. So I'm going to open the Webpack website. I remember a couple of things, how to like create the config file, how to configure a couple of things, but I want to follow the documentation. In this case, it will be easier for you to learn and to find out how to work with the documentation as well. Okay, let's start with the basic things. And first, we go in the Webpack documentation entry. Okay, so we need to create Webpack config file. By the way, there is I think we need to go into guides. Right, getting started. Here we have that. Okay, so first we need to install Webpack CLI and Webpack as dev dependencies. So I'm going to run that. Then we can already use the Webpack. So we can run npx webpack, which will take the source index.js and convert that, compile that. Okay, if we scroll down, we can see this is an example that it's using Lodash. Actually, we don't need Lodash, we just need to run npx webpack. So let me run npx webpack, package.json memory in your disk, load file system changes. Okay, let's do like this. So npx webpack, if you run that, it searches for index, source index, and it doesn't find that, so it exits with the error. Okay, in our case, we need to create a different entry script, not the standard one, which is the source index. So for this, we have to create the configuration file. So I'm going to go with the configuration and create webpack config.js. So let me copy this thing and create that file. New, it's going to be the JS file, webpack config.js, and I'm going to paste this. So the entry is not this. So in my case, I'm going to go to the front end And so if we talk about the Sass, so we're going to have two entry scripts. One will be the Sass file, second will be the JavaScript file. So I have implemented this Webpack in my real projects many times, and in general I don't put the Sass files in the web. So it is not a problem at all, but anything what is written inside the web is accessible through the browser. Okay, so we know that the web folder corresponds to this domain, so anything right here like /storage, /favicon, anything can be accessible from the browser. Okay, so we can put the Sass files right here, which can be accessible later for anybody, but maybe you don't want to show the Sass files to someone else, so maybe they should be private. Okay, so I generally create a SCSS folder in my front end, and right here I'm going to create style SCSS. Okay, and my entry script, one of my entry scripts will be, I'm going to change that entry into an object, and style corresponds to, and we have to use path resolve. Okay, so like this, from the current directory, which is the root directory, we need to go into frontend /SCSS /style SCSS. So this is my entry script. So if in my style SCSS, I'm going to write body color is red. Okay, and that finally needs to build somewhere, right? So it's going to build, because my entry object key is style, it's going to build into style CSS. But where should be the directory it should build? I'm going to remove that file name. The directory where it should be built should be frontend web CSS. Okay, so let's specify this right here, frontend /web /CSS. Let's save this and run npx webpack and see what happens. Okay, so we don't have the loaders configured because we are trying to build the SCSS. We need to install the Sass loader in this case. Okay, so let's go to the Webpack and find asset management loading CSS. Okay, so we have to install the following packages as dev dependencies: style loader and CSS loader, and additionally we have to install Sass loader as well. Okay, so let's run this and let's search for if in the documentation there is written SCSS. I think there is no SCSS. Okay, so let me search for Webpack SCSS loader. Okay, it's the Sass loader, and we can we need to run npm install Sass loader, Sass Webpack. We actually have already installed Webpack, but I'm going to run this anyway. So these two packages, style loader and CSS loader, have been installed. Let's execute this, and down below this is how we need to configure inside Webpack config.js. So we need modules, and inside the modules we need to put the following things. So I'm going to copy this modules area and go my Webpack config, and I'm going to paste this right here. Okay, so okay, for any file extension which has which is either Sass or SCSS, it uses the following loaders. Okay, this is what regex means. Now let's execute npx webpack again, and for simplicity I'm going to now open the package.json, and I'm going to put right here that npm start corresponds to npx webpack. Okay, so, and I'm going to run npm start. Okay, let's wait a couple of seconds, and I think it was built. Right, so it took that file, and where's the output? Okay, I'm looking for the output file, which should be frontend web according to how we configured frontend web CSS, but I think I don't see that. So let's check frontend web CSS. We actually don't have that frontend web, so we have frontend web style.js. So the thing is that we need to extract that style. That styling basically will be injected from the JavaScript. Okay, so if I remember correctly, if the CSS is not large, then the CSS is injected into JavaScript file, and if we just include that style.js, that's gonna add the styles, which is written right here. So let's test this. So I'm gonna use that style.js, go into the app asset, and I'm gonna include that from CSS. It is in CSS, so CSS/style.js. Save that and refresh, and look at this. So a couple of things turn into red, which means that our style started working. But I don't want this. I want a separate CSS file. I don't want the JavaScript to inject that. Okay, so let's actually let's do like this. I'm going to also change the building process. Okay, so right here I'm going to create a build directory, and then I'm going to change my Webpack config so that everything should go inside the build directory. Also in my app asset PHP, I'm going to change that the CSS and JavaScript basically should come from the build app.js and build style CSS. Okay, right now a couple of things won't work, like the padding top on body was lost because that was written right here, and a couple of other things were lost, like the image height and so on, but we're going to fix all these things. So I'm going to copy the style CSS content and put it in the style as CSS. Okay, from site CSS into style as CSS. Okay, and we have to build that style as CSS. Let's actually delete that site as CSS and style.js. So I'm going to delete that CSS folder, and let's execute that npm start once again, which should now create the files inside the build. Okay, let's have a look. So here we have that style.js, but we don't have the CSS, which we need to fix right now. Okay, I remember there is a package which is called Webpack extract CSS. Okay, extract CSS, and let's search for mini CSS extract plugin. I think this is what I want. And this plugin extracts CSS into separate files. It creates a CSS file per JS file, which contains the CSS. It supports on-demand loading on CSS and source maps. So how to get started? We need to install the following plugin. So let's install that. And then in the configuration inside the plugins, we have to specify that specific plugin. So let's open that Webpack config, and inside the plugins we specify that, but we have to require that plugin as well. So I'm going to write this here, and we also need to put that mini CSS extract plugin loader inside the rules. Okay, so right here we need first that mini CSS extract plugin loader, then style loader, then CSS loader, and Sass loader. If we did everything correctly, when we run npm start, we should see a CSS file in the build directory. Let's see. We have an error. The error says document is not defined. Okay, that happens in this style as CSS. Okay, why does this happen? Let's actually check the documentation of that extract CSS plugin. So We can specify the file name of the CSS. We have a couple of options right here. How can we actually pass that? Okay, I think we need to pass this as an object inside the constructor when we configure the plugins. Okay, new mini CSS extract plugin. We specify a couple of things right here. Okay, here we have some information. So we don't need the attributes. Okay, I think this is what we want. So we need to specify the file name. Okay, let's open our PHP store, and yeah, first of all, right here, we have to use the name of the file. So that's gonna be the name of this style.js. It should not be actually JS, maybe it should be CSS. Okay, let's specify right here up as well, which might be multiple JavaScript files. Well, let's specify a single one. So it's going to be the front end. We can specify web/js app.js. Okay, so we're going to take the front-end web.js app.js and we're going to compile that into app.js in the bundle. And the file name will be style CSS style.js. That should not be actually JS, but according to my previous experience, that Webpack always created the JS file and then imported the CSS inside that JS file. We actually don't need that JS for style. We just need app.js. Let's actually have a look. So we have that app.js in the JS folder, so that can be built. If I execute just npm start and have a look, so we have an error. And the error basically is the same document is not defined inside that mini CSS extract plugin. Okay, I'm going to look for the following error. Mini CSS extract plugin. It's pretty much the same. Window is not defined, document is not defined. So what do we need to do? Let's just try to find the best answer. Okay, here's the best answer. You're probably also loading this tile loader, which is normally used to embed the styles inside. So try removing that. Okay, good hint. So we are definitely using this tile loader. I think we don't need that. So remove that. We just need CSS loader and Sass loader. So let's now execute npm start. I think it was successful. Okay, so we have front-end SCSS style CSS code generated and front-end web.js app.js code generated. Let's check now the build directory. Okay, so inside that build directory we have app.js, which is the build version of my JS app.js. We have also style CSS, which is the build version of my SCSS style CSS, and we have also style.js, which is absolutely empty. So let's remove that style.js, maybe remove these both as well, and execute it once again. to make sure that it doesn't generate unnecessary things. Okay, it still generates that style.js, which can be avoided in my opinion, but we can leave this right now as it is, and let's check the browser. Okay, the images have been fixed, so everything basically is fixed. I think add to cart functionality also works, so the JavaScript and CSS is correctly imported. And I'm going to show you why the structure, basically how I organize my Sass files. Okay, and then we can go back to that Webpack config and just improve that. All right, so generally I put a separate SCSS file in my views. So according to my experience, that gives me a huge boost inside the productivity. So if we go inside the profile, so I'm going to create an SCSS file right here, giving the same name, whatever is the name of the PHP file. Okay, so for example, I'm going to create index SCSS for just styles related to the. By the way, why it doesn't have that icon? Okay, anyway, whatever these, so I'm creating the index SCSS file for the styles for index PHP. Okay, and then I generally give a unique ID or class to that index PHP. So in this case, I'm going to give it an ID of like page profile. Okay, which doesn't change the visual right now. Then I open the index SCSS, and I'm going to add styles right here that for page profile, the color should be red. Okay, I just need to include that index SCSS in my main style SCSS file. So let's actually do like this. So I'm going to create a main SCSS file right here, move all my styles inside main SCSS. Okay, and in my style SCSS, I only will have imports. Okay, so import main SCSS, and then import from, let's go one directory back, go inside the front end, then go inside the views, then go inside the profile and include that index SCSS. Okay, I save that and I execute that npm start. We have to configure that it should automatically build on save, right? So we need watching as well. And now if I just reload and go on the profile page, let's first log in. What is the password? Okay, if I go on the profile page, I see that everything is red. So that CSS, which is inside that profile folder, starts working. And when I make some changes, so imagine that this is a large project already, but it can get larger and larger, and you might be working with many files at the same time. Okay, so you are working on the profile page, and let's say that you created a button right here, like with any text, and you want to style that button, give it an ID of btn. Okay, you want to style that. Sometimes it's annoying to find the correct place where to write the CSS. So in this case, what I generally do, I hit that target select opened file button right here, which opens that file, and I know that my index SCSS will be next to it. Okay, I just open that, and very easily inside that page profile, I put everything inside that page profile, because that's going to be, I'm basically make sure that it won't conflict. So if I just write btn, because it has that ID btn, okay, let's change this ID. So if I just write some styles for ID btn, that might change stylings on other pages, homepage or somewhere else. So I'm going to put this inside the page profiles. I know that there won't be any other btn inside the page profile for other page. So I will simply do that and give it color, for example, green. Okay, save and compile that. and we should see the button to have the color green, but everything else color red. So let's go to the profile page, and this is the button which has the green color, and everything basically is red. So this is how I generally organize my SAS files. You can do the same thing for the JavaScript files because we can use the same type of import right there. Okay. So if you want some styles for the user account, we should do it right here. So let me now modify my main CSS. So this has some main styles, which is basically for like the main things, right? But we also have that image wrapper, and that image wrapper basically is part of the product item. Where's that? So site product item. So right here we have that image wrapper. So I'm going to create now underscore product item SCSS file and put this image wrapper right there, and also convert this into SAS. Okay, and I'm going to include that product item in my style CSS. Okay, so import views site underscore product item. Save and compile, and we should see the same output because that styling is still used. Go to the home page, and we see that the images are centered horizontally and vertically as well. Okay, so let's go to the profile page and remove that unnecessary changes I made there. So remove that. We actually need to give it an ID if you want to add some stylings, but in this case I don't have a separate stylings for the profile page, so I'm gonna even delete that index SCSS file. I don't need that, and I'm gonna revert that index PHP file, but we definitely need that product item. In the main CSS we also have some styles for the footer. So if we just extract the footer part in a separate file from the layout, we should create the separate SCSS file for the footer as well. But for now, I'm gonna leave that, and yeah, this is just the main things. All right, so let's take care of a couple of things. For CSS, we have our source files into the front-end SCSS folder, which cannot be accessed by from the browser. But for JS, this is the source file. We do have this JS inside the web, which can be accessed. So for consistency, maybe it's going to be better if we just move that JS inside the front end as well. These are the source files. It's not necessary them to be accessible from the browser. So let's just restrict that. And we have JS right here, and we have to update our Webpack config so that our source should be frontend JS app.js. Okay, and we have to start watching of the changes inside the JavaScript and CSS. Okay, let's check the Webpack configuration. So where is that? Development, maybe it should be right here. Let's search for watch. Okay, here's the watch mode. We just specify watch true, and is that all? We have that watch options, aggregate timeout and poll. I'm not sure what's this. Add a delay before rebuilding once the first file change. This allows Webpack to aggregate any other changes made during this time period into one rebuild. That's a good thing. So if for some reason many files have been changed at the same time, it's going to run the watch only once. Okay, the default is 200, so it already has some aggregation, so we can leave that if we want. First, let's specify watch true. Watch corresponds true. Then we have that watch options, and we have this aggregate timeout to be 200 by default. So let's leave this. What should be ignored, we need to specify this one as well. So we don't want anything from the node modules to be ignored. We do have the node modules already in our project. So here it is. And we need to ignore that, by the way. So let's check the git ignore. I think we don't have node underscore modules mentioned right here, so we have to specify, let's specify it right here. Okay, ignore node modules. Okay, that should be ignored. Then what else do we have? So what's the difference between these two? For some systems, watching many files can result in a lot of CPU and memory usage. It's possible to exclude a huge folder like node modules using a regular expression or glob pattern. We can also specify the other directories to ignore from the files or somewhere else. That's good, by the way. So we have to specify. We actually want to only listen changes inside the front end, right? So we don't want to listen changes in any other folder like the vendor or backend, common, and so on. So our Webpack config is for the front end only at the moment. So let's actually specify this. So inside the ignored, we don't want anything to be watched from the node modules and from other places, but maybe instead of specifying what to be ignored, maybe we can specify what to watch. So inside which directory the watching should work. Is there an option for that? What's the poll, by the way? Turn on polling by passing true or specifying a poll interval in milliseconds. Check for changes every second. Okay. So I think we don't need that. We can leave the default changes seen but not processed. Okay, this is a very common error, by the way, not enough watchers. This is how we can increase that. This is something else. I just want to include specific directory, which I think is not possible. So let's just do like this. So I'm gonna ignore the node modules and vendor. Okay, so let's just ignore these things, and I also want to ignore the front-end web because yeah, there are no source files right now and they should not be checked. So here we have that app.js and app.css, but they are not source files. So let's specify frontend / web. Okay, this is what needs to be ignored, anything from there. All right, if we just execute npm start, I think it doesn't start watching unless we specify. Let's check. Okay, it started watching. We have an error. Cannot find style sheet to import. Right, so we changed that. Go and remove that. Save. And now it was compiled. So as soon as I change something, it compiles. Look at the time right here. So the output is the same, but it actually compiles. Okay, here the time changes. Nice. So inside that, we need two scripts. So we need npm start and npm build, npm run build to build everything for production. When we run npm start, we might need that to be in development mode. Okay, so inside the build we need to run, maybe we need to use a different config file. Okay, let me think. So in general they have they have different config files for different environment. So if we have a look at the configuration, right here we have that different config file. Look at this. This is exactly what I'm talking. So we have different config files for production. I think we need to do the same thing. When we run something for production, it should not start watching. Okay, so let's create that. So I'm going to duplicate that Webpack config, but I'm going to call it Webpack config-prod.js. And when we execute npm npx webpack, we have to specify --config to be webpack config pro.js. Okay, so let's just stop that, and if I run, actually we need to modify some things right here. So I'm gonna remove the watch and watch options from the production, and maybe we need to change some things as well, but I'm gonna run npm run build right now. And all right, so it was built, it doesn't start watching, but now we need to make the difference. So maybe when we run npm run start, which should start the development mode, it should not minify the JavaScript and CSS. Okay, also right here we need to specify the mode. For the production, it needs to be production. For the development, it needs to be development, just like this. Okay, what other things do we need to specify in the production? So this is the output. What's going to be the path where output should go? File name, public path, library, unique name. Okay. Here we have all the configuration options. We haven't specified the Babel and ES6. We have to do that as well. We have resolve, DevTools. The DevTools and source maps is necessary thing. So maybe we have to specify the DevTools for the development mode. So Webpack config.js, inside here, I'm going to specify DevTool to be source map. Do we have that? What options do we have inside the DevTools? Source map. I think this is what we want. Okay, just save that, and let's execute npm start, and it should already give us the source map. If we have a look in the front-end web build right here, this is done, and look at this. Now we have these source maps as well, which is good. So we need that. But the app.js, I don't want the app.js to be minified, and it is not minified actually right now. Okay, because we specified, maybe because we specified the source maps, it's not minified. The style CSS is not minified as well. However, and maybe this happens because we specified the mode in development. But right now, if I execute npm run build, that should give us the minified versions. Let's check. Okay, here we have that. So the app.js is minified, style CSS is minified. We do have the source maps still, and I think that happens because we just don't clean the build directory. Okay, so maybe we need to clean this up. That's good thing. The app.js, I think the app.js doesn't use. Okay, let's do like this. I want to make sure that the source maps are used. So let's have a look at the following image wrapper. So the styles come from the style CSS. If I click on style CSS, it is minified. Okay, let's just run npm run start. And let's just wait and refresh, and let's have a look. Now we have the image wrapper, and this styling comes from the product item as CSS. So now it's using the source maps, and we can see also that the Bootstrap styles come from the reboot as CSS and so on. If I click on that, I see that product item is CSS. However, I'm now curious how it is for the Bootstrap when we run on production. So npm run build. Okay, reload the page. And so for the, even we are in the development mode, it's the Bootstrap is still using the source maps. Okay, so we run our CSS, our Webpack with the prod mode, but it's still using that as CSS source map. So this is something not specifically related to our building Webpack building process. That's because that Bootstrap CSS is not it's actually including the source maps. But I'm just thinking that for optimization, like for the page optimization, it's maybe good to include the Bootstrap CSS in our project as well. In this case, we're going to have also possibility to customize the Bootstrap. Okay, and this is very often what we need to do. So we have the Bootstrap CSS, and maybe this is the primary button or info button, I don't know, primary one. And maybe I want to customize my primary button color, and I want to customize the whole website. So in this case, I want to include the Bootstrap building process using my Webpack as well. So let's actually do this. So right here, I'm gonna create maybe a folder Bootstrap, or we can even create a file Bootstrap. Okay, so Bootstrap SCSS. Okay, somewhere there in the vendor or in the node modules, there exists Bootstrap. I think it is inside the vendor. So if we just check vendor, Bootstrap, where's that? Vendor esoft. No, it should be inside the npm. Where's that? npm asset Bootstrap right here. So we have that CSS, which comes from the vendor npm asset. So I can actually include, let's open that Bootstrap right here. Where's that? Here it is. So it's using all the functions and variables and everything and builds the final thing. So I'm going to copy the following import statements, go into my Bootstrap and paste this. And I have to adjust, of course, the paths. Okay, so let's specify that I want to include the following things from go one directory back inside the front end, go one directory back inside the project root, then go inside the vendor, then go inside the npm asset, and then go inside the Bootstrap, and then from the SCSS include the following files. Okay, now we need to also customize the Bootstrap variables. Now I'm going to do the following thing. So I'm going to disable the Bootstrap CSS, which is imported right here. So let's go to the frontend config main, and down below we have that asset manager, and I'm going to go inside the bundles, and I'm going to specify for Bootstrap asset class, I want to set the false. So just disable that bundle. Okay, now if I have a look in the page source, I don't see the Bootstrap CSS anymore, and the styles are ruined. We don't have the Bootstrap. So now I'm going to use the Bootstrap in my style as CSS right here. So I'm going to import Bootstrap. Okay, I import the Bootstrap, I import the main, and then everything else. So I save that and execute npm run start. Okay, so this this thinks now much more because it needs to compile Bootstrap as well. It compiled and reload, and we see everything as we saw before. The advantage of all these things is that first, we have only one CSS, and that's a good thing for page speed. And the second is that we can now customize that Bootstrap. Okay, so right here we have that variables, which comes from the npm asset, but I can create another variables which will override those variables. Okay, so let's call the variables bootstrap dash variables as CSS. Okay, inside that bootstrap variables as CSS, first of all, I'm going to import that right here, bootstrap variables, and then if I just open that variables and copy some of them, like the primary value, for example, this is the primary. So I'm going to copy that primary, go in my bootstrap variables, and assign the primary color needs to be red. Okay, so just save that. That building process was finished in 3 seconds. Okay, reload the page, and well, I don't see what I expect to see. So I expected the button color to see. I think we need to do it vice versa. So we need first our variables and then the bootstrap variables, right? Just like this. Save. It was built, and this is how it looks like. Okay, so now the primary color is red for the whole website. The link was changed into red and everything. And I can take any variable declared right here and change its appearance in my bootstrap variables file right here. So, and I will have a custom built version. Okay, that's cool, that's awesome. Let's commit all these things and have a look if we can make some improvements. So what are the unversioned files? So package log, we can commit the package log, and I think we need to commit the following build files. So there are basically two approaches. Either we can ignore the build files, but when we deploy this on production, we have to have Node.js right there and build these files right there, or we can include it. So if we include these files and commit them, the disadvantage of it is that it is generated file, and generally generated files should not be included, committed, and pushed. The second is that if two developers are working on this project and I change something in the CSS, I built that, someone else changed something in the CSS, built that, there will be conflict in the generated file. Okay, so the CSS changes might be done in separate files by me and by someone else, but there will definitely be a conflict. Generally, how I resolve the conflict, so I just take my changes or someone else's changes, and then I build that. I guess in our case, we can ignore them. Okay, so let's ignore first, and later if I decide, I'm going to include that. So I'm going to create a git ignore, and ignore everything except the git ignore itself. Okay. Yes, so let's commit now this. Okay, we can include that. I think we can make one commit for all these things. Right. So we're including from the build directory. We disabled the bootstrap and so on. Okay, so implement Webpack with SCSS building. And then additionally, we can write disable bootstrap Bootstrap asset bundle. What else? Yeah, I think that's all. So let's just comment this. Okay, good. I'm thinking now about the JavaScript. Okay, so if I open that JS right here, I think I don't have the ES6 building process. So let me create one class right here, like the person class, person.js, and which is the export default class person. Okay, let's say that it is an empty class. I want to include that in my app.js. So import person from person. Save that. It actually compiled. Let's create an instance of the person. So const p is new person, and I think that works, and console log p. Save that. I think that build process works. Reload, and in the console we see that person. Okay, this is good. I guess we can create the similar JavaScript files for any view, like in the cart, for example. For the checkout, we have well, not for the checkout, but for pay now, we have a couple of JavaScript right here. Okay, and we have JavaScript inside the pay now PHP because we need the variables from the order, like the total price, and we need a couple of other things down below, the URL on which the data should be submitted, and so on. However, if we just would not need that variables, we could create a separate JavaScript file right here, pay now.js. Okay, and we could copy all our code right there and then import that pay now. So let me just write inside the pay now console log. Okay, so that's going to be pay now. I'm going to import that in my app.js. So import, go one directory back, go inside the views, go inside the cart, and include that pay now. Save that. I hope that was built, and if I reload, I see that pay now. Okay, so the pay now JavaScript is also used. Okay, that is awesome. So we can actually delete that. We have the ES6 support by default from the Webpack. If we want to use the the TypeScript, we have to install the TypeScript loader and configure inside the Webpack. I don't actually want to use TypeScript for this project, so yeah, let me remove the person as well. We tested then and it works, so we don't need it right there. Let's actually have the configuration phase. So what other things we can do? Maybe we can avoid having that style.js. So it's for nothing. It is for nothing. It's just for the styleless CSS. Okay. So I'm just thinking, we have the style CSS map. Why do we need that style.js? Okay, there should be a possibility. Let's check the other options, by the way. So we have that extract loader, we have the CSS loader. What's the extract loader? Okay, how that works. If the mode is production, inside the loaders we put the file loader and extract loader. Path to main CSS, we have the loader. Okay, so this is now we're using the HTML extract the index HTML, so we can use that. We don't need that actually. In the CSS loader we can specify the source maps. We don't need that because we specified that from the dev tools. There are a lot of loaders when it comes to Webpack, and obviously no one can know these loaders by heart, so we need to have a look at the documentation and find out a couple of things. So for that mini CSS extract plugin, is there a way to disable the JavaScript generation? What is that ES module? Here we have a couple of examples. After a little bit of research, I found the following issue, that entry chunks for CSS files also creating the JS file, and I found that sadly, not with the current implementation, Webpack natively only understands JS and will emit a JS file with a code that gets added to the chunk by Webpack in a separate JS file. I don't recommend to use any non-JS file as an entry point in general. Requiring importing JS file is better for solution for non-JS resources ATM. So basically, this comment says that you should not have a CSS or SAS file as an entry script. Instead, you should include that in your JS file. But down below, there is one interesting package. Okay, so I faced the same issue of having a style only entry and then something, and I published it on npm. So I ended up creating a Webpack plugin to remove the JS file from the compilation. I published it on npm as Webpack fix style only entries. You can find the source code right here, and shamelessly promoting my package. So this is the package actually which does this. It's quite popular. It has 200 and something 45 stars, and this is actually how we can use that if we want. So we can actually require that, and inside the plugins add that, and when it generates the following file name CSS, it will remove the corresponding JavaScript. However, I like the first approach basically, and I think that we should include our styleless CSS in our main JavaScript file, which is the app.js. So I'm going to go in my app.js and import, go one directory back inside the SCSS and import the styleless CSS. Okay, then let's go to the Webpack config, and I'm going to remove that style from here. Okay, and we need to do the same thing from Webpack config prod. Nice. And let's actually execute npm run start. But first, I'm going to delete that build files. Let's see how it works. Okay, it was built, and I see right here app.css and app.js. Okay. I think that is exactly what we want. The only thing is that we go inside the app asset and change from style CSS into app CSS. Okay, in this case, we don't have any extra JavaScript file. We have just single entry script, but because we are using the mini CSS extract plugin, it takes out the CSS in a separate file. If I reload my browser, I see these styles right there, and we have just app CSS included in app.js, which is good. I think this fixing is necessary. The only thing I don't like right now is that I have two separate Webpack config files which actually share many things. Okay, so for example, most of the things are basically shared except that the watch options and dev tools. And I guess there is an option to pass the environment variable from the right here. So when we actually call that npx webpack. So I found something about this in the Webpack config in the Webpack documentation. So Webpack production mode. Let's search for that. Okay, so we actually have different approaches. One is to use the Webpack merge to have the common file, dev file, and prod file, and we put the common things in the common, and inside the dev and prod we use that common and we use the merge to merge those things. I think this is good, isn't it? And then we run with config dev or config prod. We can specify also the mode, whether it's a production or development, and we can even use inside that JavaScript if it's a production or not. So if it's a production, if it's a development, we can write some console log statements. If it's production, we can just avoid that. Okay, let's do like this, and I think we are done with this Webpack setup. So I'm gonna rename that file and call it Webpack config dev.js, and I'm gonna just create Webpack config common.js. Okay, and we have to install the following package, which is the Webpack merge. So I'm gonna copy that and install. Inside that common, we don't need the mode, we just need the entry and output. We don't need the watch and dev tools. We need the plugin, mini CSS extract plugin, and I think that's all. So that's all what we need in the common. In the dev, we need to require, where is that? We need to require that common. So I'm going to require that, and that's, yeah, let's actually rename that Webpack common.js and Webpack dev and Webpack prod. Okay, so now we include the common, and we need to include that merge function as well. And I'm going to call merge, pass common first, and then the current object. The current object has the mode development, the entry script, and output is inside the common. We have watch, true, and watch options and dev tools right here, but the plugins and the module is inside the common. So this is how we need to do the Webpack dev. We don't need the path and this. So I'm going to copy and move this in the production. I'm going to change this into production and remove the watch and dev tools and everything. Okay, so I think this is how we should do, and I'm going to run npm. We have to change, by the way, the file as well. So --config is webpack dev.js and webpack prod.js. So I'm going to run also, maybe this should be called dev and this should be called prod. So npm run dev. Let's wait. Okay, it's built. Let's check the browser. So this works. Let's check out the JavaScript. Inside the add to cart, that functionality also works. Now let's close that and run npm run prod. Okay, that was built as well. Reload the page, add to cart, that functionality works, everything works. If we check the CSS, that's going to be the minified, and that includes the Bootstrap, by the way. And down below, we're going to have the app.js, which is also minified. The only thing I think we are missing is that we don't have possibility to load images and fonts, and on a real applications, we might need to have the image loading and font loading as well, because we might have custom fonts, but should we do? I think we should do that. However, we need actually a couple of fonts to test if that functionality works on the fonts. Okay, so I'm gonna skip that for now, and later I plan to integrate a front-end template, front-end e-commerce template in this project, and then that e-commerce template probably will come with some fonts right there, and we have to deal with that fonts and fix a couple of things. So for now, I just commit whatever I changed, and I guess that's it for now. All right, so create separate files for prod and dev, and remove that additional CSS in the building process as well. Rename style CSS into app CSS. The package log, let's commit that. Commit and push that information, and I want to delete that image. Should I? Let's have it. Okay, so I'm going to update the README for the Webpack thing, and also change a couple of things, and that's it.